first is to have courage. The next is to have compassion. And the next is curiosity. These three things, if you can really embody these three values, right, creativity follows.
Welcome to Real Creative Leadership, a video podcast produced by the Stoke Group and hosted by me, Adam Morgan. Today, we are taking a trip to the future of design, or at least the future of design thinking. We're going to be talking to Jod Kaftan, head of product design and research for Oracle. Jod has 15 years of experience as a design leader, from financial services and healthcare to e-commerce and media. He's worn many hats: writer, editor, UX and UI designer, strategist, builder, mentor, and future thinker. And it's that interest in the future that we want to dig into today. In this episode, we are going to discuss the future of design and creative leadership, the way we actually construct that design, something Jod calls strategic foresight, so look for that, and the role of human emotions and brain science in creativity and design thinking, as well as leading future leaders. It's going to be a good one, so stick with us. Let's get going. All right, Jod, welcome to the show. I first want to give you a chance to just introduce yourself to our audience so they get to know you better. If you want to give us some background of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for the generous introduction. You know, whenever you hear yourself being introduced, well, I should just speak for myself. I'm like, God, I sound like a dilettante. You know,
You're not alone. You're not alone.
Yeah. So I've spent, like the last majority of my career in the last 15 years have been spent consulting, and about 5 of those years at Fjord and Accenture. So really working with clients and that golden age of design thinking, which let's see what we're in now, I'm not sure, but where design was really at the forefront of having C-suite audiences and coming up with breakthrough ideas, breakthrough products, and trying to bring those things to market. But as anyone who's been consulting for a while, it's like you get a little bit wistful about constantly giving your baby up for adoption and never knowing what happens to it afterward. And so I wanted the challenge of moving into the enterprise, and I got it.
Same.
And that's where I've been the last 3+ years at Oracle. And what attracted me to Oracle was really that we were working on products that would bring critical energy services to the grid and make them stable and resilient, helping reduce our carbon footprint through energy efficiency and B2B2C products. And now it's been expanded to construction engineering products, which we are market leaders in, and looking at ways to create smart construction platforms where we can be more efficient and create safer and more resilient buildings and things of this nature. So it's been a journey, and I'm still learning, but here I am.
Well, that's awesome. And I want to back up a little bit, because I don't think even though everyone's journey is unique, yours follows a trend that's very similar to mine and many others, in that, we start out in either advertising agencies or consulting or whatever it was, because that's where creativity lived. Let's be honest, like in the 90s and early aughts, like that's where, if you wanted to do commercial creative, that's kind of where you went. And the design thinking, design-led movement really changed that. And it really affected my career in a big way. The golden era of it really did change a lot. I saw a lot of creative leaders moving from just consulting or agencies and moving in-house and having a bigger seat at the table. And like you mentioned, like, you didn't want all your babies just, adopted and tossed around all the time. Like, it was a chance to own something and drive something. And when the business world woke up to that and really put a premium on, all right, we believe in this innovative thought, we believe in this process, we want to change products. And to be fair, it started around products, but I think it's leaned and pushed into other areas.
Absolutely. And, like you, I was started at creative agencies, and I got to be honest, there's parts of that I really miss, because it was so new then, right? That's what attracted me to it. I was a journalist, and I loved aspects of media, this was a frontier. It was, nobody knew what good was. Nobody knew what the right thing to do is. And that was exciting. Like things were created from scratch. Looking at a blank canvas was how we, approached every project. And, that's changed obviously with the maturity of design systems. And so it's interesting to ask where does creativity lie in, a mature enterprise UX practice? And that's a question that I try to answer every day. I don't have a binary answer to that. But I think you mentioned design thinking. That has given us a way to have almost like a meta layer of creativity. If what I mean by that is that it's not simply the object itself that gets produced or the output or the product that contains that creative force. It's all the orchestration and the relationship building and the alignment that you have to over communicate on to put a product out in market of impact. And I think that's what design thinking has helped us realize.
And throughout your journey, as you've moved from journalist to UX to this to that, now you've landed in product design. And I just want to just take a moment for those who aren't as familiar, like explain a little bit to our audience about that discipline. What is product design and your role in that?
Again, in a little history, like starting out, there were UX people, which frankly were all generalists. They all came from different backgrounds. It was kind of attracted this kind of outlaw type that couldn't fit in anywhere else. And then they found a home in UX because it was so interdisciplinary, and I still love it for those reasons. And then there were like creatives, right? So when I was working at this shop in Santa Monica, we had our creatives that we worked very closely with. I think, my interpretation of product design as it's applies today is it's it's actually a convergence of a few things happening. The maturity of design systems, as organizations have increased their investment in enterprise teams, it's hard enough to win new headcount, right, for UX. But when if you were to have to go and say, well, I need a visual designer and a UX person, they'd be like, oh, okay, now you're crazy, Jod. Like, you know what I mean? So design systems have taken some of the burden off of people that just have a pure capability and talent with visual design. But that doesn't mean they don't need a design sense, right? Which is really important. And we can get into the nuances there. So I would say, at least, at a conceptual level, product design means a true T-shaped designer, someone who can be good enough across that design capability horizontal in order to ship products. But I will say this, it's much easier to take a visual designer that is interested in things like research and UX heuristics and getting into how the technology works, and make them into a full stack product designer than it is someone who maybe comes from a development background or a business analyst and stretch them the other way. It happens, and you have to be flexible to both transformations. But visual design is still a really important skill, I think, within the product design framework. But it really does mean, in my mind, a generalist.
And let's also point out, like, for the most part, when we're talking product design, it's probably software, right? It's not like we're designing chairs or vehicles or whatever it is. Like when we're talking about product, the products themselves are most likely some sort of a software interface, WYSIWYG, something that people are experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, it's not industrial design, right? Which is the design of hardware, or chairs and airplanes and things of that nature, right? It's not service design, which we can talk about, which was another great area of growth for me in my career. There are a lot of these disciplines are adjacent to each other, and they can inform each other, just like, layers of an onion. I kind of, that is how I think of it. Like product design can exist within service design. But I remember my old boss Fjord saying every product is a service waiting to happen. Um, because we're in a SaaS environment today where the technology is changing so fast that you have to approach product design as almost like a service design mindset because nothing's fixed, right? Like things are constantly going to be changing, which is what John Maeda, I guess, would also refer to as computational design,
Mm-hmm.
just to throw another term in there.
Well, what do you think is most misunderstood about product design? Like, did people get it? Like, it makes sense?
Well, it really depends on the organization, of course, right? And one of the things I am focused on at Oracle, and again, Oracle is huge. There are many design leaders at Oracle, and like I have a specific focus over a couple of different industries. But it really depends on the maturity of that organization. Um, I think what's often most misunderstood, unfortunately, it pains me to still say this after being in the field for 20 years now, like that it's still associated with UI. It's still associated with the presentation layer. And it's really painful for me to say that after coming from Fjord and Accenture, where design was strategy, right? Design was customer, the equivalent to defining customer value, which if I said that at Oracle, or other, big tech companies, they'd be like, well, that's strategy's job, right? And so I think what's misunderstood is that it's localized to that presentation layer still, even to this day. But that's also our superpower. And I remind people on my team, one thing we can do better than anyone else, and I'll say this till probably my last days on this earth, is we can bring form to where there is none, right? We can take the intangible and we can make it tangible, persuasive, emotional. We can make it a reason to believe, right? And that will always be our superpower, regardless of the technology. Maybe AI will help us. I know we can talk about all that later. I think that's the big misunderstanding is that, it's the top of the iceberg that you can see and not the 80% below the water.
Yeah, it's always hard to quantify that when people just say, "Oh, you just put lipstick on it, right? Like you just make it look fancy." But design doesn't just mean the upper layer. And the interesting
Sure.
thing for me is so I come more from the in enterprise the marketing side of design, and I
Okay.
think there's a lot around that there's some companies those two worlds ne'er shall meet, and some of them they're a lot more tightly integrated, but even the way they work and function, like it's just a very different. I know that the design system that I use and run for our website is very different than the product design systems, even though we work together to try and create some cohesion and many elements that are common. But tell me about your experience between that divide between product and marketing design and how that's worked for good or ill.
Yeah, that's a good question. You know, maybe I'm one of those experienced people that just has the hubris that everything is experience,
Mm.
and
All the brand.
yeah, or you could take that brand perspective. Like a lot of brand strategists I've worked with have said, I don't want to stop at upper funnel. I want to be with you while they're using our services. And even as they're exiting our services, everything's a reflection of that brand. And I think that's a good metaphor. So I think of experience design in that regard too. But that being said, I mean, maybe this is an oversimplification, but I like to think of marketing design as a promise being made, right? For the most part, you could call it that brand promise, right? And product design is the fulfillment of that promise,
Mm.
uh, but they can overlap. Absolutely, right? Like there are moments of marketing once someone is already a paying customer that need to be consistent with the quality of the experience they've already signed up for as a customer. So I don't think it's something to oversimplify, but roughly that's why as a product designer, I'm always concerned with how we're talking to clients at the very beginning of our sales cycle. What's being promised, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's very siloed at these organizations. And And if I didn't raise my hand to say, like, what are you guys talking about when you pitch the value proposition of our products, right? And if we don't fulfill that promise, right? And it's a little bit different in B2B products where I work and enterprise related products, because you can easily rationalize underperforming experiences by saying, well, they bought with us again, they renewed their RFP. Well, these are huge RFPs, and the buyers, there's a lot of political reasons why someone might renew an RFP, and it might not be because the UX is so good. So that's something that I think is really critical for people in my role. You should care about every aspect, every touch point in which the brand is representing, you know, its voice, and make sure that there's cohesion and consistency in that.
I love that simplification. The brand marketing folks make all the promises, and then the product folks have to fulfill all those promises. So we better be on the same page, right? Like
Exactly.
I just want to emphasize that that's so important. And in companies where I feel like we're tight and close and communicating and working together and understanding the promises and what's being made, is such a better experience for the customer and a better experience for us as employees in those companies. I feel like when we put up these walls and it's all about, no, you're in a different design org, and it just gets so in the way, and it causes so many problems, and it's such a worthless battle. So I'm with you.
One other last thing I just want to add to that is, I think what can really help break down, this orthogonal operating model that happens in organizations is realize that we're not designing products, we're really designing relationships. And when you get into the relationship business as a product designer, you start to see dots connect that you didn't before, right? And if you think of that like brand promise stuff, or that marketing design would be focusing on, that's like the early stages of a relationship. Like, I'm building trust. I'm being interesting to talk to, because you get from me what you don't get from others. But then when our relationship gets more serious, right? Product design is then, reinforcing and strengthening that relationship. So to me, that relationship thing really unifies the whole thing.
I love it. Yeah, we're in the experience era, not just in making mousetraps. It's definitely about those relationships. I love that. I really love the way that Jod describes the need for alignment across teams throughout the customer journey. The marketing design team makes the promise, and the product design team fulfills that promise. That is so true and so amazing, and it really reinforces the need to prioritize those connections across teams, because it's those connections that influence team culture, which we know is so important. Now let's dig into Jod's perspective on creative leadership and why he thinks strategic foresight is the key to the future of design.
I think I've never been more challenged than now to bring creative leadership into sort of this age of big tech companies downsizing their design investments and, just solely focused on AI. And a lot of these are engineering dominant cultures. And like I said, they can sometimes turn creativity into a math problem that can be solved. And you even seen, this is even with the rampant IP violations, being made by Gen AI art bots, whether it's using Scarlett Johansson's voice or just the struggling artist's IP that's living in a flop house in Bushwick, right? Like there's an advancement of the technology, and there's not an advancement of the ethics that can create some unique challenges. So I like to think of creative leadership as also primarily focused on what's called moral imagination. What future do I want to live in? And what future do I want my customers and the people I work with to live in? Right. So my approach is really to find an opportunity, find a weakness in the existing orthodoxy. And it usually has something to do with a dearth of long-term thinking and innovation. And why is that? Because we're living in this era of short-term CEO tenures, right? Where they're chasing down revenue, right? And they're kind of like, yeah, it's quarters from now, I won't be in this job. That's for the next person's problem to worry
Mm.
about, right? And so we've deprioritized that longer term thinking as a result, and the propensity to engage in visioning and creating greater resilience to disruption. So I try to find something that everyone wants, which is exciting ideas that go to market. And then it's really about trying to get people to unlearn things that they've learned in order to do that. Well, we've always done it this way. What are you proposing here, this short sprint? That's going to be havoc. We can't pull the resources off their other project. No, we can always find a way. You just have to keep plugging, right? And my other starting point is really to find my tribe. And what do I mean by that? Find the people that are restless dreamers, right? Somewhere else in the company, actually deliberately outside of design, if you can find those people. It could be an intern that works in sales, and that could be a burnt out SVP of engineering that's bored with what's in the roadmap. But find your tribe and be their spark. Once you have that coalition of willing dreamers and doers, you really can be an unstoppable force. Doesn't happen overnight, but I do think that that is part of how I try to approach creative leadership.
Yeah, I'd love to respond to that because I think many think of creative leadership just as the managerial part of it, of just like I'm a
Yeah.
leader and therefore I got to lead other people and manage. But I love what your focus is on the visionary aspect of it, like that leadership. Creative leadership starts with a vision. Creative leadership starts with this alternate reality of the future that you really want, and then finding your tribe. I love that. I think that's so critical, especially as you go up the chain. That that skill and that aspect of creative leadership becomes more and more and more important. I know, like in my role, that's my job. I got to figure out the vision. I got to figure out where
Yeah.
we're going, right?
And sometimes the vision, it's not like the how, it's the what, it's the outcomes. Like our job as a creative leader is to define those aspirational outcomes. And and if you are defining how exactly you're going to get there all the time, you are cannibalizing the creative capital that already exists on your team. And what I'll give you an example. Like one of my aspirations is I want the reason that people renew their RFPs or they renew a license with us is because our UX is so good that they actually cite it as the reason. We chose you because your UX is better than anyone else, right? Now, how we achieve that, I look to collaborate with the smartest people on my team, right? And it really is context dependent. But I think we have to define those aspirational outcomes no matter how impossible they are, because they give people a reason to believe.
Well, two thoughts of just you saying that are just so great. Number one, first of all, I like the idea of finding a vision but not curtailing the team. I think it's critical. It is. You want to make sure everyone else catches the excitement and the energy of it all to push, because it takes a lot of people to push. You can't push it alone. And then I like this other second thing of like you being like, it's not enough to just have a vision. You can't be the Turd Ferguson visionary who is just like not giving a chance for anyone else to shine and Jobifying it. I think that's so critical because these are big, intricate, multifaceted, layered, cross-functional, blah blah blah. Throw in whatever word you want of like beasts of products, and it's not just an easy, just point a finger and make everyone go do it.
I think it's less about kind of through cult of personality exerting force around you so that people submit to your vision. Like that worked in advertising long ago, but right, like now the creative leader has to be more of a choreographer, right? And it has to be excel at things like really listening, you know and as any good leader should. It's a lifelong practice that
No,
I
for
won't
sure.
even tell you that I'm good at, but it's an obsession now, because now I see it as actually the foundation for a paradigm shift and change if we really listened. It's funny, like if I were to talk a little bit about a perspective on creative leadership, you know what precedes that creativity, I like to say, are three values, if I may.
Please.
So first is to have courage. The next is to have compassion. And the next is curiosity. If you can really embody these three values, creativity follows. You need courage, right, to propose a preferred future. Uh, it just takes courage because all preferred futures are political.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get resistance. But if you only have courage, you know, you're going to might be proposing really bad ideas. So what makes a future preferred is that compassion and that curiosity. And it all starts by listening. You listen with an open mind, right? And that can lead to I like to call it disruptive curiosity, right? Because if you're genuinely curious at your core, you can hear, you can look for beyond what that user research interview, what that person is saying, and look even deeper and deeper and deeper, right? Because you're curious and you don't have a bias. That's just one simple example. And I also like to say, listen with an open heart, right? Because that can lead to disruptive compassion. And I mean, you can even look at things in history like disruptive curiosity probably was the force that created people like Galileo and Thomas Edison. And disruptive compassion probably created folks like Gandhi and MLK and even Tolstoy, right? Now imagine if Gandhi and Thomas Edison collaborated, what they could have made, what they would have made together. So those, I call them the three C's, and they're very important to me. And I don't live up to them every day, but I aspire to. And when I have lived up to them, I've really seen the results happen.
Well, and an aspect of that listening and that curiosity is, and something I've talked on this show a lot about is, as a leader, it's like you talked about political futures and how it's like, or all these futures are political. When you're really doing that curious thinking, you're understanding business strategy, you're understanding how to talk marketing strategy or product strategy or, backlogs and timelines. Like you move beyond your space of just, yeah, I'm just going to try and solve this problem. And instead you're getting to a higher level. So you as a leader, you grow and you become a bigger asset to the company in many ways by moving in that space.
Absolutely. And what we're up against, and a lot of people don't talk about it, is there's a little bit of a judgmental hubris in our industry. Like, oh, if you ask questions, you're not with it, or you're not keeping up to date with the trends, or shouldn't you know this by now? And I think it really forces people into a box and keeps them timid, right? We've got to make it safe to learn again, because that's gonna be this. I mean, that's what Alvin Toffler, the guy who wrote Future Shock, the seminal book in that a lot of futurists reference. He's like, the skill of the future will be how to learn and how to unlearn, right? And we've got to make that happen if we want successful designers.
Well, that was the perfect segue into our last section that we want to talk about, which is the future of design. So what do we need to keep in mind for you? Tell me, what is the future of design in your mind? What's this ethereal place that we're going to land in?
Well, like creativity, I think design will never end, right? There's a lot of anxiety right now in terms of what impact AI will have. I think we should be mindful and not in denial of some of the shadow qualities that are at risk. The disregard for an artist's IP is one example, and then if it's constantly referencing existing art that the learning model has been fed, like where's the originality? But then you could sit back and you could say, well, robots aren't designing all the movies that come out recently, and there has been very few original movies, by the way, in recent years. They're all just remakes, franchises. Yeah. Willy Wonka's been made 3 times.
Yeah.
I mean, so my hope is that the future of design is somehow still affiliated with daring, with courage and originality somehow.
When it comes to creativity, there is a large step that happens. And you and I have both done a lot of research on brain science and neuroscience and all these types of things. And I just want to bring up one chapter of a book that I think sums it up for me really, really well in this future and AI and all this kind of stuff. And it's from The Runaway Species by David Eagleman. And he talks about this idea of like, back with Lincoln when he had his cabinet where it was like this group of rivals, right? Team of rivals. He describes in the brain that that's really what's happening, in that humans aren't like machines that it's like A plus B equals C. Like we're always like A plus B equals D, F, Q, R. Like we don't know. And it's this team of rivals. Like there's all these things that are pushing and shoving around in our brains to win. And sometimes one part wins and sometimes another part wins. And that's why we're so unpredictable and so random, and it's so beautiful. And I think there is an element to that of like, when you understand the brain, that creativity will always have a home. Like we can automate the hell out of things and it's fine, but just know like creativity of us making those leaps and changing ideas. And like you said, adding new fodder to the model, like it's that part of the human world to me, like will forever let me know there's always going to be a job for creative brains and creative people. And so don't worry about it, but just start to explore that strategy, those futures, those things, and try and bring that all together.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I mean, that really resonated for me. Creativity for me, and not to get too spiritual or anything, but it's life force. Creativity is inseparable from life. And just as life is unstoppable, no matter what they try to do, it will always be there in some form or fashion. So is creativity. And I do think this, true creativity is an act of rebellion. It's a rebellion, and it's only loyal to the possibility that it serves. It doesn't care about any consoling norms that we are told to adhere to. And, in business, we talk about disruption. Well, creativity at its core is intrinsically disruptive. And so that will always be true. How it actually gets expressed and manifested, I think that will always be, as long as there's life, there will be creativity.
Thank you, Jod. This has been such a great conversation, and I hope everyone listening learned something from it. I know I did. As always, you can find me at adamwmorgan.com. And finally, this show is produced by the Stoke Group, a full-service digital agency that specializes in content marketing, video, and interactive experiences. So if you're looking for a partner for strategy or content or anything else, visit thestokegroup.com. Thanks again for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.